So I had planned to begin this little speech in a particular way, but actually last night I went for a walk at night in front of the cathedral. There was no one else there. And this morning, as I was just saying to Stephen Wolfe at the back there, I actually feel, and this makes me sound like an emotionally incontinent millennial, so I apologise, but I actually feel quite emotional seeing you all here today. And I felt quite emotional walking in front of the cathedral because this place is so beautiful that it's almost heartbreaking, particularly coming from London. An old colleague of mine used to joke that whenever he left London, he would say he was going to visit England. And it is heartbreaking to be somewhere this English, having been so saturated in London for so many months. And I really am not overstating it when I say that this event here today, I think, is possibly the most important event that I've ever spoken at, because it's outside of London, because the audience is you. And the future of this country rests on your shoulders. It's not those people in the urban centres that are going to pull us back from the brink. So with that little preamble that's probably going to set me over time by the end, I thought I would start with a little anecdote about my grandmother, because she was one of the unfortunate older people who spent the last years of her life locked in a care home during the pandemic. And bear in mind that this was no ordinary grandmother. She was a tough old Eastender who could throw a punch well into her 90s. During the war, she was an anti-aircraft gunner on the coast shooting down the Luftwaffe. So this was not the sort of lady that you wanted to try and lock inside against her will. So one day we were visiting her through a glass door, as you do, and she was physically trying to wrestle the door open while the nurse was trying to hold her back, and she's shaking at the doorknob. And the nurse is trying to explain to her that the government has made it illegal for her to hug her family. And suddenly my grandmother blurted something out that I still think about, and I don't think I'll ever forget. She yelled, "The government can't do this, it's illegal." And the nurse seemed very, very confused by this. And you could dismiss her as being isolated, uneducated woman with dementia who didn't understand the law. She wasn't exactly capable of expressing herself clearly. Or, like me, you could stop for a minute and stand back in awe and see this ancient Cockney philosopher queen trying to explain to a care home nurse that there is something beyond the government, something extraneous to it, something higher than it, that limits its authority, a just order that the government can transgress or pervert, that something isn't just legally right or wrong just because the letter of the law says so, that there can be unjust laws, that there are rights that she has inherited as a freeborn English woman, and that no government has the authority to remove. And now she was born in the 20s and I was born in the 90s, but still when I was growing up, you seemed to hear the phrase, "It's a free country," almost on a daily basis. And those were the days when teachers still taught children, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Now, if a child called another child a retard in the playground, someone will call the police, and in fact they did, and it was reported as a non-crime hate incident. Back then, if some ninny told you, "You can't say that," your response would have been, "The hell I can, this is a free country." But children today have been completely disinherited of that. They don't say, "This is a free country" anymore because they know that it isn't. So when J.D. Vance called out Keir Starmer on the sorry state of free speech in the UK, in his Weasley way, Starmer responded, "We've had free speech for a long time." Well, sure, Starmer, we've had it, but only somebody delusional or a liar could go on to say, as he did, that we will continue to have free speech for a long time. We only have to look at the state of things. And I'll give a brief sketch. I'll make it briefer than I planned because I'm very sure, even from just speaking to a couple of you, that you're very well aware of how bad the situation is. So far this year, we've seen the police knocking at a grandmother's door because she complained about a Labour councillor and called for his resignation. And she was reported to Greater Manchester Police, it seems, by the councillor's partner, a Labour councillor, of course. We've seen a jury acquitting an ex-Marine who'd been charged over a completely non-violent video that he'd posted after the Southport attack. Luckily, he was acquitted by a jury of his peers, but he too had been reported by a Labour member of the Welsh Senedd. We've seen Labour MP Mark Amesbury beat up a constituent and get off with a suspended sentence, while the wife of a Tory councillor is serving 2.5 years for an admittedly pretty unsavoury tweet that she deleted and apologised for. We've seen Severn and Trent Water sacked for Severn and Trent Water sack a man for describing Hamas as a group of violent and disgusting terrorists, which they are. We've seen the Met take no further action against an imam who cursed Jews after October 7th and called for their homes to be destroyed. And Cambridge police announced that they've shelved their investigation into a Palestinian Action activist who slashed a portrait of Arthur Balfour at Trinity College, even though there's a video of it. Apparently they couldn't figure out who it was. And of course, one of the biggest cases of the last couple of months was Alison Pearson getting a knock at the door, the pro-Israel journalist, absolute hero. And she received a knock at the door from Essex Police, and they did an investigation into their own handling of the case, marking their own homework, and you know what they found? They found that they'd done nothing wrong, and worse, they also decided that they should actually have recorded it as a non-crime hate incident in the first place, despite the fact that the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, dropped it because no crime had obviously been committed. So brave Alison is now taking Essex Police to court, but in the meantime, the Free Speech Union estimates that the police are reporting an average of 65 NCHIs a day. Now, Harry Miller, who many of you I'm sure are familiar with his case, the judge in his case said that the police had behaved like the Gestapo and the Gestapo and the Stasi, just checking that, was the Stasi. So that should have been the end of NCHIs, but instead this government are supercharging it. Just take one example, the new Employment Rights Bill, which the Free Speech Union said will basically create banter bouncers because pubs will have to protect their staff from the harassment of third parties. So if you say something a bit naughty in a pub, then you might have to be dealt with by the establishment. Maybe you'd get barred, I don't know. So on top of all that, the worst thing that we've seen in recent months is that equality before the law is straightforwardly being trashed. The new sentencing guidelines from the Sentencing Council effectively makes it so that those from religious, cultural and ethnic minority backgrounds would be given lighter sentences. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission chair, Baroness Faulkner, said this was discriminatory. Robert Jenrick is fighting it tooth and nail, but it's still about to come in. And Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, even though, of course, the Labour Party are talking the talk, she did criticise this, but then she blocked Jenrick's bill when he tried to do something about it. We've also seen, just yesterday, the National Police Chiefs Council, it was reported on GB News, have published an anti-racism commitment which aims to, and this is a quote, end racial disparities in outcomes. So that's about the number of people from certain ethnic backgrounds who are arrested. It's not about what crimes people have actually committed. I mean, it's Soviet. There's no other way to describe it. We've also seen the British Antarctic Survey telling its scientists that meritocracy is praising meritocracy is a racist microaggression. So equality itself now is being considered problematic. And tolerance too has been twisted into a two-tier system. We've seen that diversity and inclusion are being used as pretext to erase all things British and particularly English and Christian. We've just seen a school in Hampshire cancel its Easter celebrations out of, quote, respect for diversity, instead of teaching newcomers that they should, or intolerant minorities, that they should tolerate the traditions, culture and religion of this land. The tolerance solution is apparently just to cancel Christianity. So our Christian heritage is being eclipsed, and we're not supposed to be upset that the king, who's supposed to be defender of the faith, has been tweeting about Ramadan instead of Lent. So I'm going to skip a little bit here and jump straight on to the leaked Home Office report a couple of months ago, where they even said that saying a two-tier system, talking about a two-tier system would constitute a non-crime hate incident. So really you can't say anything about any of this. It's a system that not only shows preference for people from elsewhere before the people who are already here, it's a system that takes the side of the bully. The establishment says, stop punching him, we'll do that for you. Just take the example of the man who burned a Quran outside of the Turkish embassy back in February. He was attacked by a passerby who just happened to be carrying a knife, and the police arrested them both. Another man burned a Quran in Manchester in solidarity with an Iraqi refugee who'd been shot dead on a live stream in Sweden, and he was targeted because he was known for burning Qurans. And the police didn't just arrest him, they also named him, despite knowing that this would put a target on his back for life. So they effectively issued a fatwa against him. And the victim of this man's crime was a Muslim passerby who said that it was the most emotion that he'd ever felt. And rather than saying that those feelings are unreasonable or legally irrelevant, as any sane country would do, the judge said, and this is a quote, "This is a tolerant country, but we do not tolerate this behavior." In effect, the Quran is being afforded sacred status in British courts, all while Christians are being arrested for praying in their own heads. And this will only be bolstered by Angela Rayner setting up this new kangaroo commission to define Islamophobia, chaired by none other than Dominic Grieve, the KC who wrote the foreword to the all-party parliamentary group that provided the definition of Islamophobia that has been roundly denounced as a backdoor blasphemy law, which would effectively give special privileges to the Islamic religion. So the reason why I've sketched this grim picture is because Brits, particularly outside of the cities, feel that there is a python slowly crushing the life out of us. We feel like we're being tied up and forced to watch our country, culture, religion, traditions, and liberties being auctioned off, all while being trapped in what feels like an abusive relationship with an establishment that gaslights, denigrates, and exploits us. We are being violated. So we've come a long, long way since this is a free country, in just the short time, relatively speaking, that I've been alive. And this is precisely why the Magna Carta is so relevant. Because for 800 years, whenever the python tightens its grip that little bit too tight, whenever we feel our rights or inheritance are being extinguished, whenever we feel that we are being most egregiously trespassed upon, we invoke the Magna Carta. It was especially ubiquitous during Brexit. If you remember, Tim Martin, the boss of Wetherspoon, said that Brexit is the new Magna Carta. It was also ubiquitous during the pandemic. If you remember, I know everyone's got a short memory for the pandemic, but business owners tried citing the Magna Carta in order to defend their rights. There was a tattoo parlour in Bristol, a bookshop in Nottinghamshire, a hair salon in Bradford. They all tried to override unjust laws by citing the Magna Carta. The hair salon even put up a sign in its window citing Article 61 of the Magna Carta and declaring that the Magna Carta allowed them to opt out of the rules because they did not consent. It didn't work, of course, because they got a £20,000 fine. It was prevalent enough during that time that the BBC, of course the BBC, put out an article with the headline, hiss, put out an article, "Why Magna Carta Won't Exempt You from the Rules," a public service broadcast. And it's the BBC, so obviously they branded it as a pseudo-law movement. And this is a quote from the article. "In addition to Article 61, this includes bizarre-sounding and legally invalid concepts like freedom on the land and sovereign citizens." The BBC said that these arguments were irrelevant and obsolete, and that the Magna Carta was being used by the extreme right and anti-establishment circles, held up as the one true law and seen as a justification for rebellion against legal and political elites. Legally, sure, it might be obsolete, but is it really irrelevant? Magna Carta has such a profound hold over the English imagination. It's far, far, far from obsolete. It summons this idea of the immemorial ancient constitution, a thread that runs through our chests, each and every one of us, back for almost 1,000 years, something prior to the law, something by which authority is measured. Certain historians in the BBC may be perplexed by how Magna Carta can come to have such a hold over your average Joe. Why it lives, as Gen Z say, rent-free in our heads. They'll ask how it could serve as a symbol of resistance for the common man when it's clearly an elitist document that was only ever intended to serve the interests of a small group of barons, etc., etc. And yet it's so much more than a symbol. The Magna Carta is our lighthouse in every storm, and it has been this way for a very, very long time. Tim Martin, the tattooist, the hairdresser, were walking in the illustrious footsteps of ancestors that they had probably never even heard of, because most of us haven't, because our education is so poor. Giants like Sir Edward Coke, Richard Hooker, William Blackstone, John Fortescue, and Edmund Burke, to pick just a handful. Appeals to the ancient constitution burst out of us whenever we feel trespassed upon. As it did during the fight for Brexit and the pandemic, so it did also in the 16th century in response to the threat of absolute monarchy, or in the 18th century in response to the revolution in France. Despite being bludgeoned for decades, somehow the ancient constitution still has this powerful hold on us in times of crisis, like now. Somehow, the common law mind, as it came to be known in academic literature, persists in people like my grandmother and people like you 800 years since the Magna Carta was signed. Its guardians are not the elite, but the working class. And that, I think, is a kind of miracle. And it's all the more magical because the people who guard it are unaware, for the most part, of its intellectual and historical lineage. It's there in us, not dissimilar from the way that we carry our genetics about with us, even though we don't know the names of all of our ancestors. I find that very, very moving. And so, in that back road, through that sad glass door of the care home in 2020, my grandmother was transfigured into a Cockney Fortescue. Fortescue was a 15th century jurist and Chief Justice who wrote a book that I think absolutely everybody in this country should read, and it should be on the national curriculum, In Praise of the Laws of England in 1453. And though almost no one today has heard of him, he articulated the idea that unlike the absolute monarchy in France, the English possessed a mixed constitution. In England, the monarch was not the law, and he was not above the law, but subject to it. And that constitution was immemorial, stretching back into the mists of time. 100 years later, when the influential Anglican theologian Richard Hooker was waging his own intellectual war on the authoritarianism of the Puritans, in his time the actual Puritans, he echoed the same idea when he said, and this is a quote, "Happier that people whose law is their king in the greatest things than whose king is himself is the law." So it's hard to read his ordering of words. I thought I would be inspired by the medieval hall, but clearly not. Hooker's contemporary, Sir Edward Coke, epitomizes the common law imagination. He famously wrote about the ancient constitution, incarnate in the common law as immemorial custom, essentially undisturbed, he argued, even by the Norman conquest. Whether he's right or wrong about that is besides the point. He saw these being embodied in the Magna Carta. The king, even William the Conqueror, is subject to the ancient law and cannot arbitrarily alter it. This law, as the historian John Pocock wrote, quote, embodies the wisdom of generations as a result not of philosophical wisdom, but of the accumulations and refinements of experience. Coke called this artificial reason, and by it the law could be both immemorial and alive, constantly evolving with each generation. These are Pocock's words describing Coke's view. He said, what speaks through the judge is the distilled knowledge of many generations of men, each decision based on the experience of those before and tested by the experience of those after, and it is wiser than any individual, even James I, can possibly be. And this is what Edmund Burke referred to as the wisdom of unlettered men, very far away from the views of the current elite. If anyone here knows the work of Edmund Burke, who I already mentioned, or even Roger Scruton, this will all sound familiar. In Burke's reflections on the revolution in France, he also gave a beautifully written example of the common law imagination. Written in 1790, it was the threat of the French revolutionaries that inspired the spirit of his impassioned defense of British or English liberty. This will probably sound familiar to you given the last 5 years, but the French revolutionaries wanted to scrub society until it was a blank slate, until it was year zero. And in 1789, they set out their new foundations, their new plan for society and their declaration of the rights of man. And Thomas Paine was one of their greatest cheerleaders. So it's interesting to look at how he understood the idea of a constitution. For Paine, the idea of a constitution was a foundational document. It was a piece of paper on which the country was founded. Paine had a narrow understanding of legitimacy and authority. It could only arise, so he thought, from a social contract, from consent. Anything hereditary could not be authoritative because it did not arise from the consent of the present generation. So for him, the Constitution had to be a foundational document that precedes society and which the present generation had consented to. And David Starkey, always right, is right that all bad ideas really do come from France. So this week, when I was debating a Muslim woman on GB News over the school that cancelled Easter, she mentioned that we don't have a written constitution. So effectively, we don't have a constitution. And unwittingly, she was making like Paine. She obviously had somehow absorbed that same understanding of what constitutes a constitution. So this idea of a constitution is completely alien to the common law mind. As we can see by contrasting the French Revolution to the Glorious Revolution in England, especially through the Declaration of Right, which was issued in Parliament in 1689. As Burke wrote, the English had no desire, as the French did, to dissolve the social fabric and start anew based on abstract principles. The English didn't have that level of deranged trust in the wisdom of any present generation. Instead, the purpose of the Glorious Revolution was restoration, not revolution. Its intention was, to quote Burke, to preserve our ancient indisputable laws and liberties. We were not concerned with the abstract rights of man, but with the inherited rights of Englishmen. Burke wrote, "It has not been a uniform policy of our Constitution to claim and assert our liberties as an entailed inheritance derived from our forefathers and to be transmitted for our posterity." So, indulge me because I know it's no fun listening to somebody just read out quotes, but Pocock really did say this best when he said, "Written laws contain no more than the wisdom of one man or one generation, whereas custom, in its infinite complexity, contains the wisdom of many generations, who have tested it by experience, submitting it to the multitude of demands, and by retaining it have shown that it has proved equal to them all." The common law mind sees the Constitution as something organic rather than abstract. just as the body of a human being is constituted. It's why Hooker described the constitution as the nerves and sinews of the body politic, a body with many parts moving through time. It's a completely different notion of legitimacy and authority to that expressed by Paine and the French revolutionaries, or even New Labour. Because it's an organic, physical thing, the ancient constitution somehow persists in us. For how much longer, I don't know. But the UK population is set to grow by 5 million in the next 10 years, entirely as the result of mass migration. The white British population, according to one estimate, will be a minority by 2070. If we were a multiracial society which encouraged cultural integration, this wouldn't be an issue, but we're not. We're a multicultural society of parallel monocultures, some of which are actively hostile to English culture, and we have an elite that is actively demoting English culture, if not actively trying to erase it in the name of diversity. Culture is a delicate, fragile thing. It's like the chemical composition of the soil, and if you mess with it, you can't expect that liberty will flower again on this island. So monumental are these demographic and cultural shifts that I don't know whether that organic body can continue walking through time as it has done for the next 1,000 years. We're told that we're not supposed to care about this. We're told that we should be laissez-faire about it. But which other culture would be expected to do something so unnatural as to just roll over and die? Are we supposed to accept that our days are just simply numbered, and that 800 years or more of that mystical English liberty, our inheritance, are coming to an end? I can't accept that this is the twilight of England. When I walked out last night in front of that cathedral, you can hear I'm emotional. I cannot accept the death of England. I can't. And none of us should. The place where Magna Carta was signed in Runnymede is apparently now barely marked by a grotty bandstand in a park. I actually haven't been there, but so I'm told. But somehow the idea of the Magna Carta, regardless, still has a powerful and intoxicating hold on us 800 years later. An idea of liberty unlike that of the French, which sees freedom as something, as throwing off every tie that binds us. For us, freedom is an idea of liberty that does bind us, that depends upon those ties, that makes us a people immemorially constituted, rooted in a place, in our place, like Salisbury. And through it, even though if it's only in our imaginations, we walk through time as one ancient collective body. It's a spirit that somehow seems to descend on us, bursts out of us whenever that python squeezes us that little bit tighter. The Magna Carta is so powerful because it touches something within us. It resurrects that part of ourselves that remembers who we are in this place of ours. It's a spirit that descends on us whenever that python squeezes us that little bit tighter. And right now, the python is suffocating the life out of us. And so we need it now more than ever to remind ourselves that we are not nothing. I've gone on a bit too long and I wanted to take your questions, so hopefully there's time. Is there time? Because the questions are the most important bit.
There's plenty of time. Great.
Andy, just a quick one. You mentioned the monument at Runnymede, like the park. I've been for a while, but I've been several times, and it's worth going to. It's difficult to get to, which makes the journey all the more worthwhile. But far from being grotty, it was financed, and is still financed by the American Bar Association, which I think is very telling, that the Americans appreciate the origins of this part of the law as much, if not more, than we do. Thank you.
Gentleman at the front here.
Now I'll have to go on a bit of a pilgrimage, I think, to go and see it for myself. I still haven't seen the Magna Carta. One day, maybe today.
We're in your list of Coke, Fortescue, Booker, Burke and Pocock. The one you omitted is John Hammond. John Hammond was our patriot painter, and he died for the freedoms that we now enjoy. And he's missing from the list, which is slightly odd.
There are a lot of people missing from my list. I could have a sort of monumental roster. You know, if you remember, was it Ed Miliband carved his points in stone of all of the common law thinkers? No, there are lots. There are lots of people.
What significance do you see in John Hammond?
I don't know his work well enough. No, but maybe that should be the subject of, well, for my much neglected Substack.
I'll write to you.
Gentleman at the back over there. Go.
Thank you very much for that. I think we can all feel the emotions that you are feeling, and particularly from the same millennial generation. And thank you very much for that. Thank you also for just taking us back to the time of 2020, and we all remember when the freedoms which we took for granted were suddenly within the space of a day taken away. And I remember very much a time when there was a very feverish division in society with people were being forced to turn on each other if you didn't obey the rules. It was a very scary time. But I just want to ask a question with regards to the party that imposed those rules, which was the Conservative Party, the party which is responsible for opening the borders, of which you mentioned as well, not only them but the Labour Party, of course, we know, and that they are effectively and have been condemned for their actions and their deceit of the British people. And also, in addition, maybe a new Magna Carta for Charles III.
Well, I'm not entirely convinced that he would be on board with a lot of the things that I'm saying, but yeah, I think, I mean, to answer both questions sort of tied into one about the Magna Carta at Runnymede, that's one thing I didn't mention, which is that we have given one of the greatest gifts to the free world in our idea of liberty. And obviously the Americans have a slightly mixed understanding of freedom because they have a little bit of French revolutionary influence there too. But it isn't the English, it isn't the conservative, the big C conservatives in this country that are holding up and you know, acting as the custodians of that inheritance. And in fact, I mean, you'll know as well as I do, and anybody in the audience who, you know, is maybe between the ages of 25 and 40, when I was at school, this way of thinking was not transmitted to me whatsoever. I think in these patterns and have inherited this feeling entirely from my family. This is not something, if anything, the educational system tried to eviscerate it as much as possible. And I think that the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, it's all one and the same. And the people of this country have been thoroughly betrayed. And it's why I do get emotional when I come to places like Salisbury, because I think by the time I have children and they're my age, what England will be left? Because people are not infinitely fungible. There's a kind of quality to, you know, the governments, whether it's Labour or Conservative, love to talk about communities. But it's only in the abstract sense. There's no real understanding of the fact that there is something, you know, qualitatively meaningful about a people and their culture, and particularly about the English. and about what the English have accomplished and what we've given the world. And I think that's what's being betrayed, that we cannot sustain that without having the people to sustain it. And so when I come to somewhere like Salisbury and I see this magnificent cathedral, and I just stood there last night completely alone in the dark with the cathedral lit up, thinking, our ancestors built this to the glory of God. It's unthinkable. We have become so debased, and it's on us to do something about it. And I know that that's hard because we have been betrayed and we've got no one to represent us. But we can't just roll over and die. Like I said, we just can't.
Thank you, Mark. It's an excellent speech. I can't help think that there's 140 people-ish in this room, but the wider audience is where we need to get to. I think of the BBC. I think you're in the media. How can it be arranged that there's some sort of commissioning of a programme, series of programmes to promote this sort of thing on mainstream media?
Well, I think the people that we want to reach are not watching the BBC. This is the first regional conference run by NCF locals. And I think that events like this are so much more meaningful than any mainstream media platform, particularly because, you know, the mainstream media as a platform is losing so much territory to the online sphere. NCF has pioneered through its YouTube channel, the new media. Those things have a place as a tool, but nothing can beat being together in person and being together in person outside of the cities. And like you say, over 100 people here today. This is the first conference. It's completely sold out. There are people standing at the back. You know, this is a first step, but what a first step it is. And if NCF locals can host events like this all across the country, bringing people together, introducing people to each other, re-knitting that social fabric that has been sort of slowly torn apart and dismantled over the last 50 or 70 years. I mean, I think that will go much, much further than, you know, just simply getting the message out on various different media platforms. It has a place, and it's important and worthwhile to do, and we need people who go on and, you know, take up that mantle and make those arguments and have those debates. But there's nothing that can possibly beat recreating a community of people who are concerned about these things and who want to do something about it, because I think people underestimate what they can achieve together and as individuals. It's actually because for so long people have been made to feel that they are insignificant, that they don't matter, that they can't achieve anything, which is why I say I think this is possibly the most important event I've ever spoken at, is because it's in places like this where so much can be achieved. And so I think actually, rather than going on the television and debating, as good as that is, if every person in this room sets about organising and just won't quit, imagine what that could do. I mean, I always say it would take us a very, very long way towards fixing the situation if everybody in the country would just start regularly going to the pub and to church.
Emma, you spoke about the Quran burning and the Muslim being insulted. I think it's time we start telling the establishment and the people who are insulting us that we are insulting. It's time to start being emotional back, because I do wonder if the government doesn't perceive us being emotionally affected as English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, whoever we are. And maybe that's a tactic we need to adopt as well.
Yeah, I think the only language that if we call them the elite or the establishment, whatever we want to call them, the government, the only language that they seem to speak is protest, which is not a good thing. It's a very dangerous thing. But I do think we are actually starting to see that. I think people are, whether they're Christian or not, when they see that schools are cancelling Easter in the name of diversity, it seems so obviously twisted and wrong. And people feel wounded by that. And I think it's important that people let those in power or authority know that they do feel wounded by that and that they will not accept it. Because for a very long time we've been sort of inculcated with this idea that tolerance requires passivity of us. But actually all that really does is seed grounds to whoever it shouts the loudest or whoever bullies the hardest. And that's exactly what we see with the Quran burnings. I think the reason why the authorities react in the way they do is because they're fearful, because they know that, you know, there's a potential for, you know, another Salman Rushdie style situation. There's still a teacher, the teacher from Batley is still in hiding with his family. And so I think, you know, we don't want to become like those Muslims, but we do need to say no, we will not accept the erasure of our culture. No, we will not accept you taking these statues down or removing these memorials on the basis of your dodgy history. We just won't do it. And if that requires people to, you know, going out and peacefully protesting, then that's what we should do. But it requires organisation. It doesn't come naturally to us, and I get that, because people are living their lives, and it's a very conservative thing. But we do need to make our voices heard so that they know that we're not going to accept it. And also because, you know, doing is more powerful than telling. And if we show how you can, you know, protest peacefully without being a bully, it shows the sort of society that we wish to be, the sort of soft and gentle England that we once were. In the face of those bullies who would, you know, murder you for burning their sacred text.
Thank you very much for your speech today. I thought you really touched on some kind of essence that articulated what I think, from what knowledge I have and Carta and its history. I was fascinated. I don't know a great deal about this, but I was so grateful you brought in that very interesting thing that sometimes defines the difference between French thinking and English thought and its variations, etc. And I know David Starkey writes about this in his book on Magna Carta, which I've read a bit of. But it's fascinating. The English, we used to say, are full of contradictions, very difficult to define. And one of them is this desire for the order, this respect for tradition, and at the same time, enormous revolutionary thinkers, and having an enormous revolutionary sort of impulse and boldness of thought. And I'd just like to... Today I'm in a medieval hall outside the Salisbury Cathedral. Yesterday I was in a massive, very sort of modern and ugly conference centre with 10,000 people at the big bash for reform. And so I'd just like to bring those people with us into the room, because we do have some people fighting for us. In my Rupert Lowe was not there. Very sad. However, is that, do we not, as we move forward, whatever we want to call ourselves, are we not working within those sort of interesting contradictions, within our instincts, within our history? You know, the ones who want to preserve, who want to stay with it, who want to bring it forward, and the ones who say, yeah, no, we've got to do something really radical here. There's a tension that we don't quite know how to handle. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe there will always be these factions, you know. But I feel that I think that's what this is about. And as we move forward, let's let everyone do their bit, and let's not split the right.
I definitely agree that we shouldn't split the right. I would say that I think the other key difference between bad French thought and good English thought is the issue of ideology. And it's very, I think, crucial for the right to stay well clear of becoming ideological. Because if you're not ideological, it doesn't matter if things don't sit perfectly flush. There's room there for tensions, and actually the truth lies somewhere in the tensions. That tension becomes a dynamic force that leads us to create such great things, whether it's in law or literature or architecture or whatever. That's what has really been the beauty of the English, and I think actually that's the reason why we've contributed so much to the world and to America, because we found a way to harness that tension. We found a way to, obviously Nietzsche wouldn't agree with anything I'm saying, but he talks about having the tension in the bow so that the arrow flies further. And that's something that historically we managed to harness, but I think particularly since the 90s, the string of the bow has become very slack. And if the right wants to succeed, I think it needs to avoid these kind of purity cycles, which we've actually seen over reform, where people on the right are attacking each other. You're not pure enough, you're not right-wing enough. I've even had it. I've had people telling me that I'm not right-wing. So I think we need to keep always in mind that sort of the character of the English, because it's about character, it's not about ideology. Being conservatism is a kind of being conservative is a kind of affection, not an ideology. And I think that that's the thing that will steer us well going forward. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much on the way.
Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.